Yeah. Now I gotta start over now. It'll be fine. I don't think I need my intro for... Forgot that we have to have the mic for the camera. But I've transitioned from using WordPress just for personal blogging to actually using it professionally as a web developer. I work for an IT services provider called AtNet Plus up in Stowe, Ohio. So we do all of your IT service offerings. I came in today, though, to talk. My talk is going to be tips and tricks to make sure your website is accessible. And that means making sure that your website is accessible to those with disabilities. I know there's a lot of different ways you can use accessibility. When I'm talking about it, I'm referring to making sure that people with a varying degree of disabilities can not only use your website, but that they understand the content that's in there. So, as you saw on the first page, there's going to be a reference to the WCAG, and what that is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. They basically have set up guidelines that will help people with disabilities be able to view websites and content on the web. Some of the disabilities, and I think this is one of those things that's important to go over because a lot of people think of the obvious disabilities, deaf, completely blind. I don't think a lot of people think about people that have low vision or just hearing loss, those with learning disabilities or cognitive limitations, limited movement, speech disabilities, and photosensitivity, or a combination of any of those disabilities together. The WCAG has 12 guidelines that they organize into 4 basic principles. The 4 principles are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Now, perceivable is going to be what you can see, what you perceive. So that's making sure that you have text alternative for non-text content. That means pictures, videos, audio clips, anything that's not actual text on the screen. The biggest reason for this is that if a screen reader is going through your site and reading it off to someone, if your picture doesn't have a description, it's just going to say there's a picture here. They have no idea what's in that picture because you haven't given that picture a description. And in WordPress, that's as simple as just filling out the description area in the media before you insert it. Using a description in there makes it so that that person with a screen reader sees exactly what's going on, or knows what your podcast is about, or knows what's in your video. And like I say, this includes the time-based media, so that's having captions for your video, audio, especially with podcasts now. You want to make sure you have a text transcript. It's not just for people who can't listen to it right now, it's for people who can't listen to it at all. And making sure that it's adaptable. So that's making sure that your content is going to be interpretable, whether there's formatting or not. Screen readers can't see how pretty your site looks. They don't care. All they care about is the structure of your content and the words that are written on the page, because it's literally just scanning the page and reading it off to someone. And then they're using voice commands to navigate through that system. That's where your descriptions and then navigation becomes exceptionally important. And making sure here, it says, making sure that your navigation is consistent and not styled through your style sheet. You want to make sure your navigation's always at the top of a page. Then you have your content. Then you have all that extra stuff that you like to put on your site that makes it look pretty. And that's why navigation skip links are important. You want to have it to be distinguishable, which means that your content should always contrast from the rest of your website. And what that means is somebody with low vision is looking at your site. They need to be able to distinguish where your content is. Here's your sidebar, here's your content area, here's your footer, here's your header, and here's your nav bar. Having the ability to pause and play video. It's not just annoying for those of us that don't have a disability. For those with disabilities, they might not be able to see a pause button You need to make sure that things aren't auto-playing. And then if you have colors on your website that have a meaning to them, you need to make sure there's a description there for that meaning. So somebody's colorblind, they come to your site, they can't see the color red, they have no idea what you're trying to convey with something that's red or green. So making sure you describe that somewhere on the page. I typically like to just have a disclaimer along the bottom with like an asterisk, red means stop, green, this thing is red, this thing is green, kind of trying to explain it without being too blatant about it. The next is operable, which is making sure that your website is keyboard accessible. That means that nobody should ever get stuck on your website because they don't have a mouse. I don't think a lot of us that lack a physical impairment of any kind think about the fact that not everybody that's surfing the internet is doing so with their hands. There are voice command programs out there to help those who need that kind of assistance with navigating the web. You should always be able to use keyboard shortcuts or screen reader shortcuts. WordPress is really good about that. It has the vast majority of those built in, and there are plugins to help with those as well, just to make sure that they're not being blocked. Having enough time. So if you have content with a program time limit, you should allow the user to be able to change the time restriction. The biggest example of this I can have is everybody has sliders on the front page of their site. If I mouse over that, it should stop, or it should have a pause button. Especially because a lot of people use text on those, and not all of us read as quickly as others. So you need to be able to pause that slider action so that I can read your content at my leisure. It can also be really hard for a screen reader. It'll get cut off if it shifts in the middle of it reading, and then they have to try to figure out a way, if there isn't a pause button to indicate pausing or going back, how to get back to that slide again. 3, seizures. Flashing images on your site. Keep the flash to 3 or less, and never, ever, ever flash more than 3 times within a 1-second span. I don't know where anybody would want to use flashing stuff on their site, but it's a really terrible idea for those who suffer from seizure disorders. And then navigable. That means you need people to be able to easily navigate the website pages and links. This means titling your pages properly, describing navigation links, so that's adding a description, again, like you would to an image, onto your navigation, so that if it's home, explain what home is, front of the website, so that when a screen reader reads it off to someone, it makes sense on where they're going in your site. And then you need to make sure you have skip to content links. You need to have a skip to content link so that they don't have to go through the navigation every time they flip to another page. You also need to back to top so that it automatically takes them back to the top of the page without having to navigate back up there again. It needs to be understandable. So that means readable, which means that in your settings, in your HTML, you need to have the language of the page identified. The vast majority of WordPress themes do this by default. It's not typically something you have to worry about, but it's something you should keep in mind. And then your content, and this varies based on, I guess, your user base, but the rule of thumb is that your content should be understandable to someone with roughly 9 years of primary education. So especially if you're working in the nonprofit sphere, or you're working for a government agency, church facilities, you need to keep your content at a primary understanding level. Cutting back on big words. You don't want them to have to go to dictionary.com to figure out what your message is that you're trying to convey. The behavior on your site should be predictable. So that means pages should behave in expected ways. If I click a link, it shouldn't open up to some huge page that takes over my entire screen and doesn't let me go anywhere. If I click a link, it should open either in a new tab if I'm going somewhere or continue on through your website. But not any crazy, unpredictable behavior on your site. And lastly, we have robust, which means it should always be compatible with new browsers and assistive technologies. And that means having completed tags, correctly nestled elements, non-unique attributes, and interface components that are described and their purposes identified. One of the pluses here is that with WordPress, you don't have to worry about any of this. It's all been done for you. You know, when you're making an unordered list in WordPress, you just highlight your content, hit list, and it's going to create it for you. If you hit the button with the numbers, it's going to create a numbered list for you. So you don't have to worry about having correctly nestled elements. That does that for you automatically so that it makes sense. Completed tags, that's making sure when you're uploading pictures that you put in a description, that you put in a title. Same thing with links. It asks for a description. Describe that link. It doesn't just, I mean, it helps people with disabilities, it helps search engines, it helps everybody that's coming to your site navigate it better. So we get to WordPress and accessibility. And I say here, WordPress on its own is decently accessible. The most recent update, the biggest area there were gripes before is the back end. The back end of WordPress still isn't 100% accessibility friendly, but with the most recent update, it's gotten much more friendly. There were a lot of areas where especially screen readers used to have problems with navigating through items. I wouldn't say it's significantly better, but it has gotten a lot better. On the front end, because of how WordPress is coded and set up, everything makes sense from an accessibility perspective, unless you're going in and adding custom themes, because that's where things start to change. The biggest issues that you have with WordPress on the front end is that an empty search does not return an error unless it's been specified by the theme developer. So what I mean by that is when you hit just search and you don't put anything in there, it takes you to that page. It doesn't give you an error that nothing was entered. Some themes do, because the theme author has taken that into consideration and has added that as a functionality. But a lot of themes still don't give you an error. It just basically returns an error page that's just a 404. It doesn't tell you, you didn't enter a search term. The read more links are not specific. So what that means is that, when you have a blog post and you want to cut it for your blog page and have a read more link, that read more link doesn't have a description to it. It just says read more. So what that ends up being is you would think it would be common knowledge for a screen reader to say read more, but that's still not very descriptive. It just says read more. Well, read more what? If you have 5 of those links on the page, which item am I reading more of? Because it doesn't say read more of this blog post, it just says, oh, click here to read more. And then the redundant title attributes, which is just repeating title attributes that have been added 2 or 3 times, so it gets repetitive, and they get here the same title attribute over and over again. There are some plugins and themes out there. Accessibility, sadly, is one of those things that kind of, I think, is an afterthought still a lot when it comes to web development, because it is a little bit more specific as far as your audience goes. And even with the audiences that I would think that it would be something they're keeping in mind, it's typically something that I actually have to pose to them. So like especially working with government agencies, they know that they need to be disability friendly. They don't necessarily consider that when they're redoing their website. So it's something that I have to say, hey guys, you need to take your accessibility into consideration. So it's kind of hard to find themes that are accessibility friendly. Most developers just develop a theme and they don't add in a lot of descriptions, or they'll add in redundant code so that you'll hear things repeated over and over again. The best resource that I've ever found if you need an accessibility plugin, if you need an accessible theme recommendation, or to just keep up on accessibility news is wp-accessible.org. It hasn't, I think the last recent post that I saw from them was in May, so it's been a little while, but they really are still probably the most current as far as a good place to check for resources. There is an accessibility team with WordPress now, though, so it is something they're taking into consideration and that they're actively working on. So with your theme options, like I say, WordPress Accessible has a really good curated list of your accessible theme options. There's really only 4 or 5 out there, and then you kind of have to build off of those. I will say they recently, and I think it was actually earlier this week, they released an update to the Accessible Genesis child theme, and it looks fantastic. I was kind of a hey whatever Genesis type person for a while, and then I got Genesis, and then I started using child themes, and I was like, oh, Genesis is awesome. So I would highly recommend that. It's very, very flexible, and just as a framework, it works really well. 2012 was made accessible, and I believe 2013 and 2014 are as well. That's one thing that the WordPress team has seemed to be kept up on, is making sure that those themes are considered accessible. And there is a child theme for 2010, that's 2010.5, that has also been made accessible. And then if you're looking for a bare bones framework that you can build off of, Skeleton is accessible. So it's got all the navigation items that you're going to need, all of those things, to give you a good solid framework that you can build a custom theme with. For plugins, the most important one for the front end is probably WP Accessibility. I have another page in here that I'll go over with you guys. It goes over kind of like a list of some of the functionalities for that, but it takes care of a lot of the issues that you'll run into with other themes, especially when it comes to like duplicate title attributes. It strips the vast majority of those out. The accessible Twitter feed widget for WordPress makes a Twitter feed for your site that's accessibility friendly. That's one of the places where screen readers will start to get caught and kind of loop, because a lot of those Twitter feed widgets will scroll, especially if you're just embedding the Twitter version. They scroll, so it's kind of an endless loop. The Yoast WordPress SEO plugin helps with your accessibility because it helps in titling your pages. It can also help you making sure that your language has been set. And in general, it's really good for your SEO. There's Fast Secure Contact Form, which is an accessibility-friendly contact form, which means that all of the fillable entries have a description to them. So it says name, but it gives a description. Fill in your name here, fill in your email address. Otherwise, contact forms just can come up literally as text box area 1, because you didn't actually name it when you were creating that form. It's just text box area 1. So that is a contact form that you can use that's going to be accessibility friendly. It's going to use the description that they need. And then if you need a Captcha that gives the ability to have an audible, you can use Captcha by Best Websoft. I recommend just trying to find something that doesn't make you use a Captcha, because they're still, I don't have a disability and I don't have a good time with them. So I always recommend trying to find other ways around it. Use a Kismet. For another one, I know Gravity Forms is also fairly accessibility friendly as long as you've named your contact form areas properly. It'll pull that in. And it doesn't need a Captcha on it to catch the vast majority of spam. And then back end, what I mean by that is when you're in the editor. So when you're in the back end area of your WordPress site, there's the Oz admin drop-down menu, which will make it so that your menu acts as just a basic drop-down where you have to click to expand. So the screen reader is not going to read off every option as it's going down the side. It's going to say, oh, here's posts, expand, and you'll expand it so that you can navigate further. MCE accessible language change. This one will also help with setting your language because you want to make sure that it's set to English or that it's set to Spanish, whatever the language for that site needs to be. And then the faster image insert, which is probably not as necessary now since they redid the media area. It used to be kind of a pain occasionally to make sure that your descriptions and titles were set properly on your images. And that one used to give you a couple more options. So, with WordPress Accessibility, this is probably the most important plugin that I'll add to a client site to make it accessibility friendly. And it helps with if I'm using a theme that's not out of the box accessible. They have a specific look they want. I gotta make it work. I don't have time, or they don't have time, whatever, to go through and have me recode it. It removes the redundant title attributes from page lists, category lists, and archive menus. That's probably one of the most important things that it does, is that it removes all of that redundant and repetitive text. It enables your skip links. It's got WebKit support, so it's using JavaScript for a moving keyboard focus. And that means, it lets you skip to the content, so it doesn't have to read through the navigation every time the screen reader passes through a page. Because otherwise, you have to figure, screen reader's going to go, okay, we're moving to the next page, and it's going to start at the very top, and it's going to read everything again until it gets to the content and then there. You don't need to hear all that again. You don't want to. You want to be able to just skip right to the content. And it adds skip links with user-defined targets. So if you purchase a theme and it doesn't have the back to top option, it helps you set that up so that you have a back to the top option. If your theme doesn't have, even the skip to content, it will help you add in skip to content at the top. It'll add language and text direction attributes to your HTML attributes. So that's where you're going to get help with using speech to navigate through on your text links. It removes the target attribute from links. It makes it so that for a non-disabled person, we typically set links to open in a new tab if it's going outside of your website. If it's staying in your website, it opens in the current window. It strips anything like that that you've set in there so that the screen reader can just continue on. So you won't get your new window anymore, but it's less confusing. It forces the search page error, so you're not going to have to go through and figure out how to make the search page give you that error that you need that says, didn't enter a keyword. It's going to help create that for you. It removes a tab index from elements that are focusable. Makes it so that if things are indexed across the top and one of them is focusable, it basically strips that so that they can just read down through it. A lot of fun things that are great for those of us that don't have a disability are really, really annoying for those that do, or for those that are using a screen reader. They get stuck on things like toggles because there's no real description to them. They can't see it, so they can't understand what's going on. They don't know, oh, you click that and it opens for more content. So it's going to strip that out so that it's just a basic page for the screen reader to read that content to them. And it strips title attributes from images inserted into content. So title attributes are great for those of us who can see. When you hover over an image, it tells you what that image is. Screen reader doesn't need that, it needs the description of that image. So instead of saying the title and saying the description, just gives the description for the screen reader. It adds post titles to your standard read more links. So it's not just going to say read more, it's going to say read more for this blog post. That way when they go to your blog page and you have 6 read more links on that first page, they know exactly which read more link that they're clicking on. It adds a focus outline to focusable elements. So for those with low vision, if they can't see what's being focused, it adds an outline to that. There's a lot of subtle things we do in web design that people that have regular vision have no problem with, that people with low vision have a lot of issues with. So if you have items that you can focus on when you mouse over them, it adds an outline to help stand out even more for them. It's got a toggle for high contrast and large font style sheets. I actually had a guy last night, we had our speaker dinner, that asked me, he said, yo, what default font size do you recommend? And I was telling you, I recommend you use 100%. I say that because my brother is considered legally blind. He's got a 27-inch iMac. In his browsers, his font is set to like 30 pixels high, so he can see. So if he goes to a website and it says 100%, it's going to pick up on the font size that he has set. So he doesn't have to do anything when he gets there. It's automatically big enough for him to see. The big thing that you can test yourself is hit just Control+, and that'll zoom in the font on your page to kind of give you an idea that if somebody with low vision is on your site, if they're trying to zoom in and get a better view, what's their view of your site going to look like? I don't even know, you don't even have to have low vision. Some websites or some screens at this point are so small, I can't see them and I have to up them myself. So, but it helps if you want to adjust and have a large font style sheet. You can let them switch to the large font. The high contrast is great for people that are colorblind or that have low vision. If you have really subtle color variances across your site, it could make it to where they can't even read your text. It could essentially look like a cream-colored font on a white background to them. High contrast makes it so that everything pops out and has a huge level of contrast between different elements. It gives you the ability to add a custom admin style sheet. So if you know that you're going to be developing a site for somebody that is disabled and you know the specific items that they're going to need, it helps you implement that custom admin style sheet. And then it does provide the color contrasting testing tool that lets you compare colors against their contrast standards. When I did this presentation in Columbus, I had a woman actually ask me, she was like, did you do your presentation the way you did it on purpose? And I did, because this is accessibility friendly. All the fonts are very large. I didn't use a bunch of different colors. I made sure that everything stands out a little bit. And it's just, it's there, it's readable. Because I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't think about. They say you think about the blind and you think about the deaf. I think there's a lot of gray area for those that are colorblind, those with physical limitations, those with just low vision. Because with low vision, you're probably not using a screen reader. But being able to click a button to have a high contrast view or to get your font settings larger is a significant improvement on any site for someone. And keeping in consideration when you're designing your site, making sure that keep it to 2 or 3 colors. Make sure that they're significantly different from each other. Don't use a solid white background. You use it just slightly off so that it's not glaring. Use a very dark font. Those basic things will help those with a disability be able to see your site. I do have a list of resources. These are pretty much what I swear by as far as it goes for anything accessibility. Because I know a lot, but I'm by no means an expert, and every client has always come up with something new for me to research for their needs. Let's say there's the WP-Accessible. The WordPress.org plugin, so there's the WP Accessibility. And then if you want more information about the WCAG, you can get that at any of those other 3 links. And WebAIM has some tools to help you test. It has links to tools, I should say, that will help you test, like screen reader. What's a screen reader do when it gets to your site? So it'll kind of run that through, and you can see where it might have stopping points. It'll give you examples, like there's some where they'll do a screenshot and show what somebody with low vision, how your site shows up. You know, that's some of the things that are kind of hard to test, that you know, oh man, I really need to make sure that my colors contrast enough. Well, how do I make sure that I do that? There's some tools out there that'll help you. But yeah, and then the W3.org goes specifically into coding for the web content accessibility guidelines. And that's it. So questions? Anybody? Yeah.
Okay, say, I'm a graphic designer, I have illustrations and whatnot. If I have a nice illustration in something, or anything, like if it's the photo, you could describe the photo in the description.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about like the alt types and stuff.
Yeah.
Right? What do I do for, let's say, a logo?
I've actually just gone where, like, I'll say that it's a logo. And I'll basically say it's a logo for X company, and it has, if there's pictures in it, like if it's a symbol of something, I'll literally just type out a description of what it symbolizes. Yeah.
So is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because it kind of they can get at least somewhat of a feel for what's going on with it.
Right.
But yeah, I think just saying, hey, it's a logo.
That's not enough.
You know, yeah. Well, I think the combination of a logo and then a brief description will be enough. Yeah, definitely. But you definitely want to point out that it's a logo.
Yeah.
You know, because that's important. Yes. Mm-hmm. I pretty much just test before I launch, and then I usually just make sure to remind people to, if you insert a picture into new content, make sure you add a description. Yeah, with that, I would probably just find somebody that will occasionally go through, maybe every couple weeks, and go through each post and just make sure there was a description on a picture. And then if there's not, throw one in there really quick and then remind that person, hey guys, write a description. That's really the best way you can do. Because once the actual theme, you've had it tested, you're pretty much golden. Yeah, it's just keeping up with the content then. That's kind of the hardest thing. And I know wrangling everybody in to make sure that they all do it the same way, it's not a fun time. It's not an easy thing. It's not a fun time. Everybody has their way they want to do it. Anybody else? No? We're good? I finished early. I think we have like 10 minutes left. I always leave a lot of time for any questions people have. Because, yeah. You really do. There's a lot of things that I tell people, I do a lot of marketing stuff too, and all of this stuff helps your marketing. all of this stuff helps your base users. You know, I always tell people too, anytime you're developing a site, think of the lowest level person, and that's the person that you're designing this website for. Everybody else will get it if you design it for that person. Yeah, I mean, they might, but I would just tell them, look, you know, you guys are a municipality. There's certain regulations that we should follow, and one of those is making sure that a website is, you know, accessible for those with disabilities. You know, I swear by, you know, keep it simple, stupid. I really do, because if you overcomplicate it, everything else gets more complicated. It's harder to get the site well ranked. It's harder for everybody to use. The simpler you can keep it, the better. And I don't think it's an insult to people, because even if it's a location where it isn't filled with people, like it's, you know, a highly metropolitan area that has a bunch of well-versed computer users, I still don't want to fight with your website. I want to go and find my information and leave. So, you know, that's one of the things that you can kind of point out to them. It's not an insult. It's, I want to make it as easy for you as I can. And I think a lot of these guidelines follow that, you know. You don't have to have a disability to be annoyed by a website using 15 different colors. You know, with autoplay videos, flashing stuff in your face. Nobody wants that anymore. So I think it does help rein in too if somebody thinks something like that is a good idea, and you're just like, you can say, I don't want to give somebody a seizure. You know, autoplay video, I don't want to confuse somebody with a screen reader or a disability. I've used that before, honestly, as a reason why you don't want to have an autoplay video on a site. I mean, it annoys me because I'm sitting at work surfing your site and a video starts playing, but my baby could be asleep over there, or, you know, who knows? You know, it's common, I guess, courtesy, that things that a lot of people I don't think go through. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it is. Mhm. Yeah, yeah, you're stuck in your hole, right? Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. The simple things that I always start with is, and this is what I do on every site, even if I'm not making sure that they're accessibility friendly, I always make sure fonts are set at 100%. And I always use percentages for sizing fonts through sites. Most themes do that now. I also make sure that I use the descriptions and title attributes for pictures or videos or audio. That's just my marketing telling me, hey, that's another place for me to put in a description. You know, it's convenient. It helps both. Screen reader reads it. Google likes to see it, because Google can't see a picture either. You know, the only reason Google knows what your picture is because you described it. So that helps there. And then just making sure that I have a lot of contrast between my colors. Mm-hmm. It's responsive. Yep. It is. It really is at this point.
It sounds like accessibility should be the same way. Am I wrong?
No, it really should. It really should. And a lot of it is, but there are some basic things from like the user perspective that you have to know to do. Like you have to know to write a description for a picture and put it in. But we're still really trying to get to where it is kind of by default that, you know, there's skip navigation links. I don't think that it's just not become commonplace, say the way responsiveness has. And I think a lot of that has to do with everybody wants responsiveness. There's a much smaller portion of the population that needs the skip navigation links. So it's a lot harder for them to get the same rallying response as we've gotten for responsiveness. Oh, you're fine. We've got like 4 minutes still, so we're fine. Yes. Yes, they will. Like I say, the WP Accessible has all sorts of information on there. It is a great site to find out even more. And same with the rest of them. Like the plugin one, if you go to wordpress.org and you go to the plugin repository and search for accessibility, I'm pretty sure that's the first one that comes up. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, thank you. I'm going to go home and think about that.
Yeah. Well, that's your job. Let's say that's our job as a web developer. The client comes in and they tell us what they want. And then we look at their actual user base and we say, okay, here's what your users want, though, and what they need. And then figuring out how to turn it back around. And I think having, like, I've given the guidelines out to people and said, it's 4 basic principles. And once you sit down and read them, they make sense. It's 12 different things that are all really basic once you really get down and look at them, because they were like, oh, we have to make the website accessible. It's going to be this terrible, painful thing, and it's going to look horrible. No, it doesn't have to be. It's not like that anymore. You can have a very fantastic looking, accessible website without much paint. Anybody else? Yes.
And your slides already up? Are you putting them up?
They are up. If you go to my Twitter @radkitten, they are up. I did link to them. They're on SlideShare. So they are open to the public. It doesn't look quite as pretty because I like using custom fonts, but it'll be okay. Anybody else? Are we good? Did everybody like Corey for lunch? Oh my God. I figured, I was like, oh, I go on right after lunch. Everybody's going to be like, oh, it's nap time. But yeah, that's what I say. He got everybody energized again. So it's like, yes! And if you guys were interested too, we had the okay from the Dayton guys. I'm on the committee for WordCamp North Canton. And our WordCamp is going to be May 2nd and 3rd. And then the first day for us is going to be a marketing boot camp. And then the second day will probably have the same style tracks that they've had here. Yeah, it's going to be a half day at Stark State. Yes, I think it's 12 to 4. And we're not providing lunch that day, but we will have a snack. We have popcorn and chocolates from a couple local companies coming in. No, we're not that bad. No, we actually have, I think, 4 different speaker session type things lined up to just go over like SEO and Facebook and social media and all of that stuff, and how you can use WordPress to kind of leverage all of that together into a package. Yeah. Once we have enough speaker submissions? Yeah, it really just depends. We're really hoping to have like a basic outline within the next month or so, but we're still trying to get enough submissions to fill everything out. Because we just opened our call for speakers like a month ago. So we usually, everybody's like, oh, I want to speak, and then dry spell, and then right like a couple months before, he's like, oh, I better reply. And it's a lot the same atmosphere that they have here. I told them, I was like, the locations kind of like are very similar to each other. The whole feel of the day is a lot the same. So yeah, we work together pretty well. All right. Well, everybody have a good rest of your afternoon. I think we're coming up on, we have our break. We've got a couple minutes, 12 minutes or something. So they come by and they're like, I'm like, okay, but nobody. Maybe the other sessions are still going. So I say, I have to go up against SEO. I'm going to lose. No, I know that because I'm the one that typically, I do a lot of SEO talks too, so. Those always bring in the big groups. Woo! Are you up next? Yay! HDMI, and I believe they might have connectors. Let's see. I know they do. I just don't know where they